Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Dan and Joe Sports Show. As always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.
Well, Joe had a lot of great games last weekend, crazy shenanigans in Knoxville. But I think the biggest stories from last weekend are the fact that we have two more Power Five coaches that don't have jobs, and their firings couldn't have happened in more crazy ways. You got Coach O, who comes off what is a massive upset of Florida, second year in a row. They upset the Gators as double-digit underdogs where no one thought they had a chance. And then the firing of Nick Rolovich for refusing to get the COVID-19 vaccine. And Joe, just to show that we're not a regional show that only focus on Auburn, Ole Miss, and the Southeast, let's start with the Nick Rolovich thing, because in my mind, that's actually an even more interesting firing than Coach O's. He comes off a win against Stanford, which cost me some money, by the way, a lot of money. That one hurt. I did not see that coming. This Washington State Cougar team had won 3 games in a row. Rolovich has got a really interesting background. I think he was a quarterback at Hawaii. He worked, I think he was part of the staff they had at North Dakota State that won so many games and national championships. And I thought he was going to, he was doing a really good job there. But apparently he's very conservative and he has high-level views about the fact that he did not want to get the COVID-19 vaccine. And I think there's going to be a great lawsuit over this, but I didn't know this, but apparently what Washington did is they made a law that all of their public employees had to get the COVID-19 vaccination by Monday, October 18th, or else they lose their job. And the only way that you could get around this is if you had a religious exemption. And apparently Rolovich applied for a religious exemption, which I'm sure was full of malarkey, didn't get it. And then he and five of his other coaches on the staff got fired after the 18th when the deadline passed. And so, Joe, just wanted to get your thoughts on this. And I mean, starting off, do you think that that's an enforceable law even? And he's already filed a lawsuit. Do you think he's going to win?
I think he's got a good chance because I was reading about that today about his lawsuit that he had filed. And what I kind of liken the situation to, I know it's different from a coach versus a player, and this is college versus professional, but it reminds me a lot of, everything going on with Kyrie Irving in the NBA. And the status of Kyrie Irving is that he's not allowed to really be around the team and practice with the team with the Brooklyn Nets because he's refusing to get the vaccine. And so I kind of thought this situation where with Rolovich, if they had these laws in place, they might make him be away from the team more, kind of limit his access to the players. But for them to go as far as to fire him for this, that was what kind of surprised me.
Well, and here's the thing. What I think you ought to do is don't make this about him, but he needs to file a lawsuit that's a class action for all of the employees in Washington that got fired over this, because I'm surprised that they're actually even allowed to do this. I mean, to me, it's one thing for private industries to have COVID-19 vaccination requirements. If you own a private business, that's your prerogative. But when you're talking about on the state level making that mandate, I'm very shocked that's constitutional.
Yeah, no, it's very surprising. And, due to those questions, like you said, good grounds for a lawsuit and class action is probably, something that's going to happen as well.
Well, and you think about it from his perspective too, that means that he gets fired 4 calls and he gets nothing of what's remaining on his contract. And so there's a lot of money involved in this. And I'd be interested to see how passionate he is about this. Is he a guy who's going to take some settlement just to have this thing go away? Just get a little bit of the money he's owed? Or does he care enough about it to really take this thing the full way and see what the Washington Supreme Court says, and maybe even the U.S. Supreme Court? I mean, this is a very important issue right here.
It wouldn't surprise me at all if he doesn't intend to take this all the way. I kind of think everything we've seen so far, I think I could definitely see him taking that firm stance.
I kind of think so too, Joe, because I think personally, if you care enough about this to just not go ahead and do it and risk losing all this money, obviously you have some kind of really deep-held personal belief. I'm not espousing the correctness of that belief or which side of the way I believe that is. I just find it to be very surprising that the state of Washington was A, able to pass that, and B, is enforcing it the way they are.
Yes. No, it's very surprising. I think you very well articulate that. Like, just due to his behavior, you feel like regardless of where you stand on the issue, he's going to, intend to take it all the way. And then the other thing is, he's going to be out of coaching right now. And so, it's not like he's going to quickly find another job this season.
Absolutely not. And I think that the reason he got fired is definitely going to hurt him in getting a job in that part of the country. You look at, the way the politics work in the West Coast, it tends to be more liberal. Liberal means they're going to be more sensitive to the virus and more serious about enforcing things like vaccine mandates. And so I think he's definitely going to be out of a job for a little bit, but I'm interested to see if he takes this as an opportunity to, be somewhat of a, like a figurehead of those who are against getting the vaccination. And because he definitely has an opportunity now to really be at the forefront of what could be a huge class action lawsuit in the state of Washington.
Yeah, no, and I think that will probably happen too.
I think so as well. But, never in my life did I think that I would see a coach of a major college get fired, not because of what happens on the field, not because of something like a personal issue, like, a Bobby Petrino type issue or what we're hearing about Coach O, but literally from the fact that he makes a decision that he believes he doesn't trust the vaccine or doesn't want it, whatever it is, but he doesn't want to get a vaccination. And that is the only reason he does not have a job. Never thought I would see that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely unprecedented, but obviously, since 2020, it's been uncharted territory.
Absolutely. But let's go to the other side of that now. Talking about Coach O. Obviously, you and I have been talking about it all season. I mean, from the very beginning with "get your ass on that sissy blue shirt," and then losing the game to UCLA. And of course, the way they blew that lead against Auburn, losing at home for the first time in 22 years to Auburn, you knew things were getting kind of hot for him. And I kind of thought that when he lost to Kentucky the way he did, maybe that was it. I mean, that was an embarrassing way that they got beat down by Kentucky. I didn't get to watch the game, but from everything I've heard about it, it was a complete destruction. But I thought that maybe, when I saw them win against Florida, I didn't think there was any way that he would get fired now. I thought they would at least give him till the end of the season to work through whatever happens, or, at least until he lost another game. And then all of a sudden, the day after, it turns out that he'd been fired that week before that game even started, and they agreed to pay him out the $17 million of what he's owed. But then the strangest part to me about all of this, Joe, is they're going to let him coach till the end of the season. I mean, let's think about this real quick. What is the one thing that Coach O has over maybe any coach in the history of time? He might be the greatest interim head coach we've ever seen. He got the interim head coaching job at LSU, coming in as an interim, got to be the head man there. He should have had it at USC. I think they won every game when he was the coach at USC as an interim when Lane Kiffin got fired. And all the USC players wanted him to get the job. They just didn't give him the job, I guess, because maybe that's the way USC is. He maybe wouldn't have been the right image for him or something like that. And so how can you give him this? Because in my mind, let's say that he goes out and wins the rest of his games, which would it 100% shock you, Joe? I don't think that I would be blown out of my mind if LSU somehow won the rest of their games. I'm not saying that I'd expect it and that I wouldn't be, a little bit surprised, but it could happen. I think this is a massive mistake for you to fire him and let him coach out the end of the season, because what happens if he goes on a huge run?
Well, here's the way I look at it. I'm looking at two factors. One is timing, to your earlier point, off the cusp of a big win against Florida, who's been a ranked team and a good competitive SEC East team this year. That really surprised me. And then also to your other point about leaving him as the interim coach the rest of the season, here's the way I see it. I've seen a lot of situations in the past where coaches have stayed on maybe for the final 2 or 3 games of the season as an interim coach, and then they just the team completely tuned them out after that point. And so I think there's also a chance that could happen to LSU. I think when I look at the schedule right now, I mean, the only just sure win is what ULM. Every other game easily could be a loss. And so I'm if you want to salvage the season at all, if you're LSU, if you intend to fire him anyway, why not bring in a new voice and see if you can kind of galvanize the team, win some games, and then see whether or not you like that interim coach for the head full-time job going forward. And so nothing about, this makes sense. If you're done with Orgeron, why hold on to him now? I don't get that.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying it's the wrong decision to get rid of him. I think it's strange to fire a coach after he beat one of, I would say maybe your third or fourth biggest rival in a huge upset. And of course, we're talking about 2 years removed from a national championship. But Joe, here's the stat that I want to throw out that I've been hearing all week, and that everybody who's been so supportive of Coach O's firing hasn't talked about enough. Do you realize that right now he has a better record at this point in his career at LSU than Nick Saban did by one game?
Oh, wow. No, that's a great statistic. And when you look at LSU as a program, they're one of the programs that when they have a bad season, they never really go like really, really bad like some teams. They're not going to have that 3-9 season. Like their worst seasons are usually like 7-5 and 8-5. Like I know last year they went 5-5 with the 10-game SEC only schedule, but that's probably the equivalent of like a 7-5 or 8-5 in a normal year when you add in the non-conference wins. And so, yeah, what he's done the last 2 years to me didn't really necessarily warrant the fan base to be so like determined to fire him. I mean, I've always been of the school of thought if a coach wins a national championship, especially going 15-0 with the history they set 2 years ago with the records, like I'm fine to hold on to him for a few years. I feel like he has a longer leash. So I feel like it has a lot to do with everything that's going on with like the NCAA in addition to the results.
I think so too, Joe. But personally, I think they should have given him one more year. I really do. I mean, when Auburn fired Gene Chizik 2 years removed from a national championship, I remember I was a student at Auburn when we won the national championship. I worked with the football team. Auburn won that national championship in large part because they had a generational talent in Cam Newton. He covered a lot of flaws that team had. He did just absolutely spectacular things that you've had people that have put up numbers since then that were like that, but you haven't had a person that was that single-handedly responsible for someone winning a national championship. Not even Joe Burrow, I feel like, was that big of a reason that LSU won that national championship. He still had a whole lot of talent around him. And, Cam had some players around him too, but that was 90% on him. And the next year, Chizik goes 8-5, almost loses the very first game to Utah State. We had to kick an onside kick to beat them. He loses to Clemson the next week very badly, probably the first big win of the Dabo era. And we go 8-5 and get destroyed by LSU, Georgia, and Alabama. The next season, we go 3-9, don't win a single SEC game, and the combined scores, I think, of the Georgia and Bama games were 94-0. Okay, that was embarrassing. Auburn's program had become an absolute embarrassment within the course of 2 years. That's not where LSU is right now. LSU lost to a UCLA team that's one of the more talented UCLA teams they've had since Rick Neuheisel was there. They lost to an Auburn team that was desperate to end a curse that they had in Tiger Stadium. They lost 22 games in a row there, and they lost what was a great football game there where Bo Nix made some spectacular plays. And then they got beat by a really good Kentucky team. And the Kentucky team, that one is the worst one because of the way they got beat by Kentucky. You never expect Kentucky to go out and beat LSU and really be the dominant team on all sides of the ball. That's discouraging. But how can you fire him before the Florida game, not say anything, and then now you're not going to reward him at all for winning the Florida game? I mean, to me, I understand that it's a great job. You've won 3 national championships there, but how are you endearing yourself to the best candidates out there when this is the message you put out there? The message is you can win a national championship. You can have your program get worse, not necessarily be terrible, and we'll fire you even after you win a game. I mean, to me, that seems cutthroat. And if I'm someone that's a James Franklin at Penn State, if I'm, even Mel Tucker at Michigan State, why do I want that? I mean, what is making you more attractive to me right now?
Yeah, and that's why I was telling my dad earlier tonight, we were talking about who might be a candidate. I don't see them hiring or being able to hire a top-level head coach that's at a Power 5 program. Like, it would surprise me. I see them probably having to end up with somebody that's a coordinator that's wanting to kind of boost, their career and take the LSU job. Because you're right, it's unreasonable expectations. It doesn't make sense when you look at the wins and losses compared to other coaches that are still coaching that have never had anything close to what Orgeron's done in his 5 or 6 years in Baton Rouge. And I mean, the other thing is winning the national championship and going 15-0 the way they did 2 years ago. You almost feel like if Orgeron became his own worst enemy, because then living up to that, always kind of became a letdown. Like, it's impossible to ever, top that kind of season. And so I think that may have hurt him too. Another kind of maybe after effect of what's happened or transpired, I talked about the NCAA investigations. Another thing could be, I've noticed over the last couple of years, it seems like LSU has had a lot of players opt out, a lot of players transfer. And I know a lot of teams have had that kind of movement with the transfer portal, but it does seem like it's happening much more common at LSU.
Yeah, Joe, I read some articles this week. There's a really good one on SI.com by Ross Dellinger that goes into what they think is like kind of the nexus of when things started going downhill for Coach O. And apparently he went on like a Fox News or said something and started talking about how much he liked Donald Trump and everything, and didn't really participate in some of the marches that they had around the campus for the George Floyd, protests and whatnot. And that really kind of started some stuff with his team. And it seems like since then, he had a lot of players, not buy in. You seem like maybe you have some guys that have a little bit of an injury, but let it go all the way throughout the season. And then you look at somebody like Jamar Chase, doesn't even take a snap last season. You look at Stingley, it seems like he's kind of somewhat opted out the last 2 seasons. And I mean, it goes on and on with his players, and that is definitely an issue. And I definitely feel like you see it more at LSU, but I think that's something that was going on for a while at LSU. I mean, do you remember the last season that Leonard Fournette was there? I feel like Fournette played in 3 games the entire season. He definitely wasn't really injured. I 100% believe that, because I was at that Ole Miss LSU game when he was coming off an ankle injury and he rushed for 270 yards on 11 carries. I mean, that guy wasn't hurt.
Yeah, I blame he and Christian McCaffrey for kind of starting this precedent of top-level players setting out bowl games. I feel like ever since they did it, everybody does it now if they're not in the playoff.
Right, exactly. And so that seems to be a little bit of a cultural thing at LSU. And like I said, I find it to be concerning. And my point is, I think that I understand why you'd want to get rid of them. I just think that it was too soon. And I'm not saying that you can't fire a coach after 2 years, because I was fully supportive of Auburn firing Gene Chizik because of what had happened to us. Auburn should never go 0-9 in the SEC and have a 3-9 record. That is not something that should happen at Auburn, not with all the talent they have, not with the history. LSU having a 5-5 season and having a 4-3 season where they beat a top 15 Florida team and they lost to a good UCLA team, a good Auburn team, and a good Kentucky team is not grounds for you to get fired in the middle of the season, especially after beating Florida 2 years removed from a national championship. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, it's 5-5, with a 10-game SEC slate, which is really the equivalent of 8-5 normally. And that was without Jamar Chase, your best wide receiver, the Biletnikoff Award winner.
And that was off losing Dave Aranda, off losing Joe Brady, off losing Joe Burrow, off having, 6 players drafted in the first round, 13 starters off that team not returning. I mean, they lost so much. And not to mention, no one thinks about the fact that Miles Brennan has been hurt 2 seasons in a row for him, which was supposed to be a starting quarterback. And, the thing is, there are some off-the-field issues that are concerning. They are, but do you really think that if he had followed up that 15-0 season with a 10-1 record last year, if he were maybe he just lost to UCLA, but then won all of his SEC games right now, you think we'd even be having this conversation?
Probably not.
So I don't know. I just find it to be a very puzzling move by LSU. And I'm not saying that it wouldn't have been the wrong thing to maybe get rid of him at the end of the season. I still would have given him another season, but I think that would have made more sense to do that. To me, that just sends a bad message that I feel like you have muddied the waters of what is a fantastic job that the last three coaches have won national championships. And suddenly, in my mind, I don't see LSU as the program that's going to get James Franklin, which I think personally, I think that's like the golden goose out there right now. Urban Meyer is not yet available, even though he probably will be, but I don't think you can do that one right now, right? So, I mean, who else is out there that they can get? They're not going to get Jimbo Fisher. That's just crazy talk. And in fact, that would be a terrible decision on his part to go to LSU after the way A&M has just bent over backwards for him and given him everything he could ever want. So who are they going to get? Who are they going to get that's better?
Probably nobody. I mean, I think that their options are going to be kind of limited, and like to all your points, at the point that you remove a head coach less than 2 years from a 15-0 season in the middle of the season, I mean, who would want, to put themselves in that position where, you could be very content in another SEC job where you don't have that hot seat?
I mean, Joe, let's talk on James Franklin for a second. If I were him, how crazy would I be to leave Happy Valley for LSU right now? I was just up there, Joe. It is a football paradise. Like, it's amazing. The people are so nice. The fans are good. They're not going to throw things on the field and try to throw golf balls at you or anything like that. They're accommodating to all the people that come. You have a bad season where James Franklin last year started off, 1-6 or something like that?
Yeah.
They didn't call for his head. They let him come back. And this season, he's been leading a consistently top 10 program that probably would be number 3 or number 4 if it wasn't for the unfortunate Sean Clifford injury, because they were better than that Iowa team. I'm convinced of that. And you know what? Like, if you're him, why would you leave that to go to LSU where they fire a guy 2 years after a national championship, fresh off winning a game against Florida where they were a 2-touchdown underdog?
No, it's senseless. And the other thing is, if you add more and more of these just high-level successful head coaches into the SEC West, it just kind of clogs things up. Like, somebody's got to lose at this point by default. You can't just have all these national championship or contending head coaches in the same conference. I mean, somebody's going to be the odd man out, and I don't know why you would want to risk that given the circumstances.
Absolutely not. So, I mean, in my mind, I think the best they can get is Mel Tucker. I really do. I think Mel Tucker is a good coach. I would question myself the sample size, though. He's doing a great job at Michigan State this year. They're 6-0, but he's been a head coach for 3 seasons? He had 1 season at Colorado before he jumped ship to Michigan State. Last season, he had a lot of things to deal with. Didn't have a great year, but he's doing a good job this year. But you're gonna get rid of a national championship coach to get someone that hasn't achieved anywhere near that? I mean,
yeah, I think he's definitely their best chance to hire someone that's a current, successful Power 5 head coach. I still think they're going to end up with an up-and-coming coordinator. That's my prediction, whether it's somebody from the NFL or somebody from a college ranks.
Joe, I think that they're going to swing and miss on a lot of people, and they're either going to get Tucker or Dave Aranda. I think Dave Aranda is a high-level possibility.
Okay.
That's going to be my betting favorite right now. I think Dave Aranda ends up being the LSU head coach.
Interesting. Okay.
All right, Joe. And when we come back, we're going to recap some of the games that we had last week. I just really wanted to get into this Coach O story because to me it's fascinating. I mean, how someone can really fall from grace the way they did. And I know that there's a lot of things when you go from the Title IX to the way they handle the Darius Guy situation to the reports of Ed Orgeron bringing women to practice and, his divorce, basically happening within a month of him winning the national championship. But, the bottom line is those are all personal things that if he was winning wouldn't have cost him his job.
Right.
So I don't know, just, part of it is selfish too, Joe. I just kind of liked having Coach O in the SEC. He made me laugh. I thought he was a very interesting, figure, and he just fit LSU so well.
Yeah, I mean, you had, Kiffin, he and Leach. I mean, those are 3 of the most just fascinating, polarizing characters you could have in a conference.
That's right. All right, when we get back, we're going to talk a little about Lane Kiffin and his big win that he had over Tennessee and some of the other big games we had last weekend, including when I mentioned earlier about Iowa being overrated, their awful loss of Purdue. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.